He has won so many admirers across Africa and the world. Still, he has so many critics. Most of his critics are Tinubu's supporters from Nigeria. They say he has done little to deserve the good publicity and praise that he is getting freely. They say he is overhyped, and the claims about his achievements sound so good to be true. But facts about his exploits rubbish the criticisms he gets. Ibrahim Traoré is silently leading an economic revolution in Burkina Faso. In fact, his achievements, particularly in the agriculture and industrialization, are not talked about enough. In this episode, we will unveil the many unmatched achievements of President Traore. Much of it are just not reported well. You will be shocked. You see, Ibrahim Traoré took over power through military coup d'etat, a means many consider to be unconventional or old-fashioned. For instance, the so-called advocates of the American style of democracy and the ECOWAS kicked against the coup. According to them, military coup was unacceptable in West Africa. But while ECOWAS and co jeered at Traore, Burkina Faso citizens cheered and hailed him as a national hero. Why did they hail him? Burkina Faso had been a shithole country. While it is blessed with immense natural resources like gold, enough to serve its 23 million population, it remained a very poor country. Most of its governments, mostly democratic, took turn to destroy the country. It looked like each of the governments competed against the previous one on which is worse. The same way Nigeria's Tinubu is competing to be a worse president than Buhari, his predecessor. Before Traore took charge, what happened in Burkina Faso is exactly what is generally obtained in Africa. Democracy is only used as a means for criminally minded politicians to steal power and use the power to loot their countries dry. It is also a tool Western powers use for neocolonialism, the 21st century type of colonialism where African political leaders are mere puppets of world colonial powers, particularly the French government, which can be disposed of anytime. In Burkina Faso, the French powers had total control. They installed the governments and controlled resources of the country. They removed any government that went against their orders. Most of the coup the country suffered were either incited or plotted by the French powers. Perfect examples are the governments of ex-president Roch Kabore and the immediate past military ruler Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. Both leaders submitted to French authorities and ran client states for them in Burkina Faso. This explains why immediately they were removed, they ran to France for shelter, and the French government did not hesitate to embrace them. With the above background, you should have an idea of how Burkina Faso people felt before Traore took over. They were a very poor, sick, and ratchet people. They are blessed with rich resources, but were begging for bread. Their economies were a mess, and life was miserable. Burkinabe, as they are fondly called, knew that much of their problem was the French government. They knew that insofar as France was ruling over them, they would remain slaves in their land. They were tired of the French and desperately wanted them gone. Ibrahim Traoré rode on this anti-French sentiment of his people to clinch power in 2022. Immediately he took charge, he incited a Burkina Faso first Pan-African movement. Through the movement, he has inspired a deeply impacting economic revolution in critical sectors, particularly agriculture. How did he make it possible? commercial purposes? A one-line answer to this question is bad governance. Burkinabe are people who are willing and active in farming. They have the land, the skill, and the ability, but they lacked the equipment and the right infrastructure to engage in commercial farming. This is where the government should step in and support. Unfortunately, none of the previous governments attacked the problems to find a lasting solution. Because the past governments neglected the agricultural sector and refused to invest in it aggressively, the sector remained stagnant and unproductive. The country's economy suffered for it. The country survived merely on exporting raw produces and importing finished or refined products for local consumption. The infrastructure to boost production was non-existent. Here is an example. Burkina Faso is one of West Africa's leading cashew producers. In 2024, it boasted of producing 161,000 tons of cashew. With its population of 23 million people, which is only about the population of Lagos State, one state in Nigeria, Burkina Faso produces more than half of what Nigeria produces, about 240,000 tons. Yet, Nigeria has a population of 230 million plus people. Although Burkina Faso produces 161,000 tons of cashew, only about 16,000 were produced in the country. The rest of about 145,000 tons were produced outside the country and then imported for local consumption. This is just one example of many of how Burkina Faso was losing its raw materials to producing world powers, especially France, and paying heavily to import the finished produces. It is simply their government deliberately refusing to invest in production infrastructure. Ibrahim Traoré figured this and many other immediate problems and needs of the country. So, as soon as he seized power, he began what we may call a deliverance journey. It is a journey of calculated, intentional intervention that offers solution to the actual needs of the people. What did they do? They targeted solving the problem of infrastructure for production or processing of raw materials that the country is rich in. Ibrahim Traoré approved funding for 2 tomato processing plants to be established, and in a few months, they were set up. They are the first ever tomato processing plants in the country. Both production plants impacted the tomato sector instantly and immensely. Production of tomato jumped from 315,000 metric tons in 2022 to 360,000 metric tons. Traore and his team didn't just relax after that achievement. They moved on to cotton industry and built a processing plant. The cotton processing plant would be the plant in Burkina Faso. He set up a body called National Support Center for Artisanal Cotton Processing to help local cotton farmers and boost local cotton production or processing. The agency provided funding, business mentoring, and management to the farmers. The next phase for Traore and his team was to provide equipment and empower the workforce. They looked in the way of millet production and opened access for farmers to get hybrid seedlings. He then purchased mass farm inputs for the farms to embark on large-scale commercial production. He focused on farmers in Burkina Faso's regions, particularly Boucle du Mahon, Sahel, Nord, Center-Ouest, and Est, where millet production is high. In short time, millet production rose from 907,000 metric tons in 2022 to 1.1 million metric tons in 2024. The empowerment equally saw rice production rise from 280,000 metric tons to 326,000 in the same years under review. Probably motivated by the massive impact his intervention had on the agricultural sector, Traore splashed an extra 78 billion francs CFA to acquire more equipment for the farmers. Some of the equipment were tractors, tillers, motor pumps, etc. This was back in May 2024. You can imagine how much happy the people felt. A few months before Traore's intervention, they were tilling the ground with bare hands and their power. Now, they have equipment and machines to make their work easy. For instance, for a farmer who could only produce 1,000 tons of millet in his farm, it is a no-brainer that with the aid of farming machines, such a farmer can do more than 10 times that number. Traore, in his thoughts about how best to fund farmers and their work, it was a bit difficult organizing farmers and helping them with financial empowerment individually. So they figured that grouping farmers into cooperatives where they could apply for interventions was better. He introduced a cooperative system. Farmers in the same sector formed cooperatives to access government funding and other interventions. This made the interventions easier to access. It worked! He looked into the livestock sector and set up the Livestock Resilience and Competitiveness Project, pre-sale, to manage government interventions in the sector through cooperatives. Traore teamed up with the World Bank to inject 120.5 billion franc CFAs into the sector, and like other interventions, there was an immediate impact in the livestock sector. The project, which is scheduled to run from December 18, 2023 to December 31, 2029, is also creating incredible impact. Traore launched another farmers empowerment scheme where he gave over 400 tractors, 239 tillers, 710 motor pumps, and 714 motorcycles for rural commercial farmers. Burkina Faso's economy felt the effect of Traore's aggressive approach to agricultural revolution, and it didn't take long for results to manifest. The country's GDP jumped in the first quarter of 2024 by 4%. This year, 2025, Traore is intensifying the economic intervention measures, and he doesn't seem to have any holding back at all. Earlier, from 21st to 24th May, he took a trip to Bobo Dioulasso, the second largest city and one of the productive cities in Burkina Faso. It was a journey of immense economic revolutionary projects. He flagged off the construction of 2 manufacturing plants, cashew apple processing plants and veterinary medicine manufacturing units for the first time. He released 104 billion CFAs to local commercial farmers in city and delivered a series of agro-pastoral equipment and inputs. Burkina Faso is on a fast speed towards industrialization, and it isn't an occurrence by chance or luck. It is as a result of a deliberate, aggressive government intervention in critical areas that enhance development. What's more, Traore and his team captured the actual need of his people and economy and committed themselves to solving such needs. Facts about his success rubbish his critics and render immense lessons to his colleagues from other African countries.